If this small waterway were to stop, it would cause the world's greatest economic disaster. According to well-known geographical divisions, the world contains dozens of straits and maritime corridors through which commercial ships pass daily. However, among all these passages, there is only one that if closed tomorrow would be felt by every human being on Earth within a few short weeks. Whether they live in New York, Tokyo, Cairo, or Rabat, this passage is the Strait of Hormuz. Approximately 20% of the entire world's oil supply passes daily through a strip of water whose actual width does not exceed about 33 to 40 kilometers at its narrowest point between the coasts of Iran and the Sultanate of Oman. Nearly 20 million barrels of oil pass through this region every single day without interruption, but it does not stop at the numbers. In recent years, the strait has witnessed the seizure of tankers, ship bombings, and direct military confrontations between naval forces. Insurance companies have raised their premiums for tankers operating in the region. Naval fleets have begun conducting continuous patrols in the surrounding waters, and major shipping companies have prepared secret emergency plans that they do not disclose. This means only one thing: this strait is not just an ordinary shipping lane. It is a genuine vulnerability in the entire global economy and a lifeline for the whole world. So, what is the full story? And why has the world not found a solution to this problem until now? Before we begin, if you are new to the channel, subscribe and activate the bell so you can receive our clips as soon as they are released. But before we begin, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video to support our content. Thank you. To understand the real problem, we must first understand the geography. The Arabian Gulf is surrounded to the north and east by Iran, and to the south and west by the world's major oil-producing nations: Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Collectively, these countries possess massive oil reserves and produce enormous quantities daily, which they must send to the rest of the world via giant maritime tankers. The problem is that the entire Arabian Gulf has only one exit to the open ocean, one single exit with no alternative end. That exit is the Strait of Hormuz. At its narrowest point, the strait is 33 to 40 kilometers wide, but the actual shipping lanes used by vessels are much narrower than that, approximately 4 kilometers for inbound traffic and 4 kilometers for outbound traffic. That is all there is. Within this narrow strip, supertankers reaching up to 400 meters in length pass through, loaded with millions of barrels of oil, heading toward Asia, Europe, and America. However, a perfectly logical question rises here. Haven't these countries thought of building alternative routes that bypass the strait entirely? The answer is yes, and some have already done so. Saudi Arabia, for example, built a pipeline that crosses the Arabian Peninsula to reach Red Sea ports, bypassing the strait completely. The United Arab Emirates also built a pipeline connecting its oil fields directly to the port of Fujairah, located outside the strait on the coast of the Sea of Oman. But the problem is that even combined, these two pipelines can only transport a small fraction of the volumes that pass via tankers. Their capacity is limited, the cost of transporting oil through pipes is higher, and building enough pipelines to accommodate all the region's oil is a massive undertaking that has not yet been realized. Therefore, the bulk of the oil still passes through the strait, and the global economy remains a hostage to this narrow strip of water controlled by Iran. This is exactly what has driven engineers and strategic planners for decades to study a completely different idea, much bolder and larger concept. At the northern tip of the Sultanate of Oman lies an area called the Musandam Peninsula. This peninsula extends into the Strait of Hormuz like a rocky, mountainous tongue piercing the water. And the observation that caught the attention of engineers is as follows. In certain spots on this peninsula, only a few dozen kilometers of land separate the Arabian Gulf from the Gulf of Oman. The idea of a canal, which periodically resurfaces in strategic discussions, is as follows: to excavate a direct canal through the Musandam Peninsula that allows tankers to travel from the Arabian Gulf to the open ocean without approaching the Strait of Hormuz at all. thereby bypassing Iran. On a map, the idea seems perfectly logical, even ingenious, but the problem is that flat maps do not show the rugged terrain. The Musandam Peninsula is not a sandy plain or flat land. Rather, it is part of the Al-Hayyar Mountains, which are among the most rugged and harsh terrains in the Middle East. The mountain peaks there are composed of steep, solid limestone, with some summits reaching heights of over 2,000 meters above sea level. Constructing a canal here would not mean dredging sand or leveling soil. Instead, it would require blasting through entire mountains, removing them, and carving a path through massive blocks of solid rock. To make the scale of the challenge clear, modern oil tankers known as Very Large Crude Carriers (VLCCs) are among the largest ships in the world. Some reach 400 meters in length, 60 meters in width, and sit 20 meters below the water's surface. A canal capable of accommodating these vessels would have to be incredibly deep, very wide, and have stable walls, all while meeting every navigational requirement. The volume of rock that would need to be blasted and removed would amount to hundreds of millions of tons, and the environmental impact on the fragile mountain ecosystem and the surrounding marine life would be massive and difficult to even estimate. As for the cost, engineers speak of figures starting in the hundreds of billions of dollars, and the costs could far exceed that. To put it into proper perspective, the expansion of the Panama Canal project, considered one of the most massive engineering feats of the modern era, cost about $5 billion, whereas the Musandam Canal would surpass this figure many times over in far more difficult terrain. However, engineering, despite its magnitude, is not the greatest obstacle. The Musandam Peninsula belongs to the Sultanate of Oman, a country with its own independent sovereignty and developmental priorities. To this day, there are no official plans to build a canal there. Oman's developmental strategy for the region focuses on tourism, ports, and regional infrastructure, rather than carving a shipping lane through its mountains. Even if Oman decided one day to approve the idea, a project of this scale would require massive international funding from nations and sovereign wealth funds. It would also require the cooperation of the oil-producing Gulf states to guarantee the canal's use, as well as long-term security guarantees to protect this vital artery from any threat, which in itself is a complex issue in a region far from free of tensions. Here lies the true paradox of the entire matter. Let us assume, for the sake of argument, that every obstacle was resolved. The mountains were removed, the money was found, the agreements were signed, and the canal was built. Would the world have solved its problem? The answer is no. The canal would not eliminate the bottleneck, but would simply move the problem elsewhere. Instead of relying on the Strait of Hormuz, global oil flows would depend on a single artificial canal. This canal would be susceptible to different sets of problems. A single tanker running aground inside could block the passage for weeks, much like what happened in the Suez Canal when the ship Ever Given halted global trade for 6 full days. In March 2021. This meant that any targeted attack on the canal's walls or infrastructure could disable it, and any earthquake in a geologically active mountainous region could inflict severe damage upon it. The global economy would have replaced a natural bottleneck that has existed for thousands of years with an untested artificial one that consumed immense time and money. Why, then, does this idea repeatedly resurface in strategic discussions? Because it reveals a truth far deeper than just a canal or a strait. Global trade in the 21st century, despite all its technological advancement and economic complexity, still relies fundamentally on a very limited number of critical geographical points: the Suez Canal in Egypt, the Panama Canal in Central America, the Strait of Malacca between Malaysia and Indonesia, and the Strait of Hormuz between Iran and Oman. These few points are what effectively maintain the movement of the global economy, and all of them are fragile to varying degrees. The idea of the Musandam Canal is, at its core, an attempt to redesign geography to remove one of the most dangerous points of vulnerability on the planet. However, mountains do not yield easily, and politics is even harder than mountains. For now, the Strait of Hormuz remains, as it has always been, a narrow strip of water where the shipping lane width does not exceed about 4 kilometers. carrying a fifth of the world's oil energy on its back, and potentially becoming, on any given day, a flashpoint of tension that shakes energy markets from the Far East to the Far West. As long as the world remains dependent on this passage, the idea of the Musandam Canal will continue to haunt engineers, strategists, and anyone who has ever wondered, how long will the fate of the global economy remain hostage to 4 kilometers of water? And now, I have a question for you. What is the greatest threat to the stability of the Strait of Hormuz at the moment? And in your opinion, which country would be most affected in the event of its closure? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. We have now reached the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and we will meet in the next video.